Welcome to the Making Learning Addictive Show. I am your host, Brian Romero Smith, senior that is. I have to preference that now because my junior, he's growing up. He's about to turn 18 on this Friday. I have to make sure that he understands that I am dad and he is son as he heads off to college. But anyway, we want to thank you for joining us tonight live. For those that will be watching on the replay, we want to thank you also for spending some time out just to visit with us, listen to the conversation, interact with us, and hopefully learn something from this very important topic that we'll be talking about today. And it might help if I turn off my banner so you can actually see me. What's going on, y'all? Sorry about all of that. But we're going to be talking about a very important subject and question, and that is burnout inevitable? A lot of us are talking about it, in our various roles, especially here in education. Seems to be a topic that is brought up on a daily basis. So I've got my good friend that's actually going to come on, and he's done a little work, around this topic, burnout. So it might be very beneficial for you to listen in. If you got questions, once again, you know how to do it. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, if you're watching on LinkedIn, you do have the opportunity to interact. Put your questions in and we can actually answer your questions and bring them a part of the show. But you can only do that if you are live. On the replay, you just have to deal with the questions that do pop up. However, if you're just on Twitter, you'll only be able to watch it, but we appreciate you watching us wherever you land. So anyway, so without further ado, let's bring on our very special guest. What's up, Kevin?
Hey, Brian. Good evening. Good evening. So happy to be here. Congratulations to Brian Smith Jr. That's exciting.
Yeah. Yes, super exciting.
You got a grown-up already.
Well, he's my second. I have one that's in college already. She's a junior in college, and then him, and then two more to go. So
there you go.
I am counting down the years, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just being honest. I am.
Hey, it doesn't mean you love him less, but the time comes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, for those who don't know you, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So I was a teacher in Broward County out in South Florida for 8 years. I taught every grade level from 7th to 12th. Received my master's and PhD in curriculum and instruction from Florida Atlantic University. I wrote my dissertation on new teacher burnout. So I've studied burnout really from a lot of different angles, but I really hammered in on new teachers at that point. That's typically where burnout starts, and that's where it's most effective, unfortunately. So did a lot of work there. I left the field myself. I quit teaching in 2021. So I'm actually more than a year out now, which is crazy to me to think of too. But I'm out here now. I'm still doing some consulting in the field, book writing and all sorts of other good stuff in the education field. So I'm glad to still be in it, but I'm not all the way in it in the classroom anymore. So
okay, so very important question right off the bat. Mm-hmm. Do you miss it?
Oh, God, yeah.
You do?
Absolutely. Okay. It hurts me when I say I'm not a teacher. Like, let me tell you for real, it hurts to say that. And, we got to a point, my wife and I had so many talks about it before I quit. And I actually resigned the year before, but once COVID hit, my principal called me like, hey, we need help. We can't replace you. So I stayed an extra half year just to help out a little bit more. But we got to the point where we couldn't afford to be teachers anymore. Especially where we were out in South Florida in that Broward area, Palm Beach area. Teacher pay was stagnant for the 8 years I taught there. And apartment rent was going way up. And when we finished our student loans, you see, that's on my mind. When we finished our PhDs, both of us went through grad school. So we've got some major student loans. And, once we got a year out, we're like, okay, now these loans are due. We got to make some real choices. And we couldn't find a way to stay in the field with those salaries. So
Okay,
it
so
made
therefore,
a choice. So.
so therefore, I'm really going to pivot from the planned questions that we talked a little bit about,
Sure.
because that right there is a very important element um, to why educators feel this way.
Hmm.
Being financially compensated for the
Yeah.
work that we actually do leads to frustration, when you evaluate what you put in and the
Yes.
time that you put in, the emotional strain that comes from what you put in. So, but it causes, well, actually, I'm not going to pivot too much. It causes us to ask that very first question, though.
Mhm.
Is there a difference between burnout and just fed up?
This is a great question. And I think it really does tie into what we're talking about with something like salary, right? When you're just fed up, there's a momentary situation that's made you upset,
Mm-hmm.
right? And something happens in your mind where you either create a solution to whatever made you fed up, or you accept that there is no solution for it and you move on, right? Like if I'm walking down the street and somebody just looks at me and yells an insult, well, what are my options? I either confront them and yell back, which probably won't end well for me, but it's an option. Or I have to walk away and accept that there's somebody on the street that didn't like me. And okay, I got to shrug my shoulders and move on. So the difference between that and burnout is once you make your peace with that moment, and depending how big the moment was, it might take you longer to make that peace. But once you've made your peace, you can now successfully move on from it. Burnout is something that I call it consistent and pervasive, right? So it's something that stays with you for a long time and it affects you at the deepest level. So when you talk about something like salary, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
right? If I didn't have money one day because maybe my check got delayed, but then my check came later and it was a good check and it was worthy of, what I put into the profession, that's not a source of burnout. That's I'm frustrated I didn't get my check on time,
Gotcha.
but things worked out okay in the end. But if you're consistently not getting paid what you need to get paid to survive and to grow a family or to do whatever your goals are, well, now that's something you have to think about at work. You have to think about it when you're at home. You have to think about it with every purchase you make. You have to think about it when you plan where you live and how long you commute. You see, so now it affects every aspect of your life, not just that one moment where you're getting your check and you're dealing with the problem in that moment. It follows you everywhere and it changes how you react to it. So that's more along those lines of burnout. So, being fed up, yeah, there are things that can make you angry and it can last.
Yeah.
But if it's not something that's lasting in every part of your life and infiltrating the way that you think and the way that you operate on your own life, that's not really burnout. It's just, something that's, making you upset in the moment. Burnout lasts.
I appreciate that explanation there, especially with tied to the lingering aspect,
Hmm.
of the problem, and right now, with inflation on the rise,
Uh-huh.
that's a deeper concern. But is it possible that we are experiencing something other than burnout with this, or could it best be COVID fatigue?
So when I think about COVID fatigue, right, everything that's happening for educators, everything that we're experiencing now, 99% of it, I would say, was happening before COVID, right?
Okay.
Because what are the issues that we're worried about during COVID? Things like overcrowded classrooms, comments and opinions held by parents and politicians, uh, being overworked. I could go on and on. The list is, innumerable. But I would, be pretty confident to say that everything that we're experiencing post COVID was happening pre COVID. Now, what did COVID do? It made everything more exposed, right?
Yeah, right.
because now parents are in the classroom with their students. And now we're in the news because everybody's remote. So we've all just, we have the opportunity to sit back and see what's happening.
Mhm.
And, education has been under this lens. And you also have to remember, we're about a year away from what they were calling crisis education. And now we're in a year where they're saying this is supposed to be normal education again. We've made it past, whether we have or haven't, but the news and the media cycles are saying, hey, we've made it past, back to normal. Everything needs to look stellar again. And we don't feel so stellar. And we haven't had the opportunity to change some of those systems that were harming us to begin with.
Right.
So, yeah, COVID made everything harder for every teacher. But in the exact same methods that teachers were already burning out from to begin with.
Right. And it's just exacerbated by
Right.
the current situation that we're in.
Mhm.
So I asked that question out there on Twitter,
Mhm.
is burnout avoidable?
Mhm.
Is it inevitable? Is it going to happen at some point in your life?
Mhm.
What's your take on that question?
Whew. I hope I don't make educators upset with this answer. I really hope not. Please don't come for me. If you do, it's okay. I can take it, but I got to be honest. In the research, when you look at how burnout works and how it begins, it always starts with passion, right? We like to talk about burnout when we start feeling overwhelmed. We start to feel like we've just been beaten down, we're exhausted. But the real start of burnout is when you start to feel passionate about something. And you could think about anything in your life that you have a real passion for. The second you feel that way, what happens? You want to divert more time, energy, attention, focus to that thing, right? Because you love it.
Right.
So that's got to come from somewhere. And it starts coming from all the other aspects of your life. Now, here's the key tipping point. If you are bringing that passion to something and it's rewarding to you and it's satisfying and you're getting the outcomes that you hoped for, you always stay in that bubble of, I'm passionate and I love this. That's still the first step of burnout, but you stay there. So are you burning out? Technically, yes, but you're appropriately dealing with it by fueling your passion and continuing to be passionate. What happens with teachers? Well, we start at that level of being passionate, and I would be pretty confident to say, the vast majority of teachers go into the field because they're passionate.
Yeah, right.
They love kids, they love school, they love the subject they're teaching. There's a lot about it that just fuels their desire. But then the reward part of it doesn't come to fruition. If you are a first-year teacher and you have an amazing first year, you're phenomenal with the students, your classroom management's on point, your students are growing in every aspect of their life, what happens? You get larger class sizes, you get more preps, you get loaded with volunteer work. Hey, can you come to the game? The kids really want to see you. And now all of a sudden, because you've done well, you actually get less reward and more work. So you still have that passion, but now it's cutting into the rest of your life because now you got to spend more time outside of school working for school. So now everything starts to suffer, and the thing that you used to love, you eventually start to resent. So is burnout inevitable? If you are passionate about something, you are going to be burned out. And I'm putting it in big air quotes because you might not feel it. Because if you stay in that level of I'm passionate and I'm also receiving what I want out of it and it's not harming the rest of my life, then yeah, you're burnt out, but you'll never feel a negative symptom of it. You'll thrive there, and burnout can actually be a good thing for you. But the second that scale starts to tip, I'm not getting what I want out of this. This is becoming too much. It's draining me from the other parts of my life. That's where we actually start to feel the real symptoms of it.
Okay, so I can go in many directions.
Yeah, sorry, I know I just kind of threw all that.
With that, because many people, like myself, always said that the reason why I would get out of the classroom was never about the kids.
Right.
It was about either the system or the adults,
Mhm.
that impeded me from being able to do the things that I want to do, that originally I felt that I was called to do. And you mentioned no longer getting that reward feeling,
Mhm.
out of what you're doing. But could it be that reward is masked by the systemic issues that teachers are facing? Like the
Mhm.
reward is still there, but it is no longer as valuable
100%. I
to
think
you.
you're spot on with that. When you really think about what success looks like in a classroom, right? I know that there are many students I taught that I felt greatly rewarded just to be able to interact with them on a daily basis and see them grow. And it might not have even been academically,
Right.
but to see them strive for something in their life that they cared about, seeing them achieve whatever their own version of success was, that is entirely satisfying. But now, if you remember, okay, so that's one student, I have 200, and before I can celebrate that success, I have, 20 IEP write-ups that I have to do. And I need to
Mm.
fill out progress reports for each student. And I need to justify the data on my last standardized test prep. You understand?
Oh yeah, don't even
So
mention that.
yeah, so when you talk about the systemic issues that, our schools face right now, they absolutely get in the way of anything that would feel like a reward. I could look back on my teaching career, and in only 8 years, I had so many things that gave me hope and inspiration, and those little moments with certain students who made me feel like everything I was doing was worth it. But that one moment would be overruled by 50 moments that came before and after it that completely beat me down and sucked all the joy out of it. You know? So,
so, so then, okay, all right. So before I ask this question,
mhm.
how do we help folks recognize their triggers that lead to burnout?
Mhm.
And I guess my concern in that
Mhm.
is there's going to be a lot of tough situations in life,
Of course.
right? And as we're seeing the mass exodus right
Mhm.
now from the classroom, not just from the classroom. We're seeing
Mhm. Every
superintendents saying
level. Yep.
saying peace out. I'm not dealing with this stuff.
Oh yeah,
You
school
know,
board members I've
yeah,
seen
yeah.
across the board.
Right, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
there's attacks coming from every angle at every level. But
Yep.
the impetus for me really asking this question really didn't have much to do with me teaching or the reason why I left education. It was
Mhm.
more about the projection of those feelings that I would place on others.
Mhm.
Everyone knows that, I'm a dad and I'm a dad first. I'm
Yes,
showing off
sir.
my just dadding shirt, right now. I'm a dad first before anything else. And I had systems in place that
Mhm.
would help me avoid being overwhelmed as an educator, right?
Mhm.
My principal knew I'm not grading any papers on weekend. I'm not.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, when we stopped using paper, I was the first to stop using paper and pencil, and I came up with other ways for my students to demonstrate their mastery. One, I was trying to make it more meaningful for them, but also easier for me to really understand what it is my students were learning during the process and not waiting for a summative opportunity at the end. Now, I got that a long time ago because I said to myself, if I ever wake up in the morning and do not want to go to that building, it's time for me to leave.
Yeah.
But then I had several of those days.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't want to leave, but I
They don't
had
warn you.
no, it doesn't. It just
Just show up.
all of a
Yep.
sudden. But what made me leave was the projection
Mhm.
of it. My frustrations, I brought them home with
Mhm.
me. And the worst thing to do is put it on your kid for no reason.
Mhm.
How do we help people who are willing to stand and fight at this particular time in this burnout season? How do we
Yeah.
help them not project?
I think that's probably the most important question you can ask. Uh, when you think about projecting, if you're burnt out, it will follow you in every aspect of your life. So you don't get to just be burnt out at your job and then come home and everything's peachy keen. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So as you, the individual, right, the way to see burnout is to look at the physical and the emotional symptoms that you may be displaying, because these do follow with different types of symptoms. So physically, when you're burnt out, you will get sick much more often. So you got to think about, how often did I get sick before I was teaching? And then, account for kitty cooties, because that is a thing.
Right.
But if you're getting colds, if you're getting colds and flus much more often, if you find yourself getting headaches regularly, that doesn't mean you're burnt out, but it's a sign, right? If you start to get stress-induced headaches, if you start to, I had, ulcers and acid reflux when I was burnt out. I actually had to go to the hospital for that.
Wow.
So, and I'd never had an issue like that in my life. So when you start to feel physical symptoms that don't seem right, and you can't put a finger on, like, okay, if your arm hurts because you broke it, that's different. But if you can't put a finger on why you're getting sick so often, you may be in danger, and that's something that you should be evaluating. Now, your emotional symptoms, that's where you could really rely on friends or a spouse or somebody who just knows you well and really cares about you, should be able to pick up. Are you isolating yourself more? One of the number one symptoms of burnout is isolation. You come home, you don't want to talk about work, right? Or you're not feeling good. Somebody tries to comfort you, say, no, I'm fine, right? So those feelings of isolation, it can spiral into things like depression. If you find yourself frustrated often at things that shouldn't frustrate you. These are all clues, right? So, I'm not a doctor and I don't make the blanket statement of that means burnout, but I do say that so you can really start to think, if you're a teacher out there, when you start to notice symptoms that you didn't notice before, it's something that should clue you in. Am I taking on too much? Is something happening at the school that's now affecting my home life? Once you get to that point, then you have to realize, I need to be proactive, right? The hardest thing to do when you're burnt out is to be proactive about trying to fix it, because you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And that's the catch-22 of burnout. The reason it hurts people so much is because it makes you feel so overwhelmed that you don't want to do anything about it.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part. But, from research, I'm going to throw a handful of strategies at you, and these are equally important. They're all good. One strong option is mentorship. When you're burnt out, you don't want to vent to people who are in the same situation as you. You want to be able to go to somebody who's been there, done that, and is at least one step removed from your position, so that they can help you without them also feeling it and you spiral down together. Along with mentorship, positive coping mechanisms, vital. All right. Positive coping mechanisms means things like exercising, sleeping 8 hours a night, or, you have kids, I have kids. So, as close to it as you can get. Healthy nutrition. Doesn't necessarily mean dieting, but that you're eating healthier foods, right? All of the things that are going to keep your energy up and keep you as physically healthy as possible will help you overcome any feelings you have of burnout. It'll help alleviate those symptoms. Like I said, if you're getting colds and flus often, but you're also taking care of your health, you'll bounce back much quicker. It won't overwhelm you as much. So you got your coping mechanisms, you've got mentorship. After that, setting positive boundaries. Like you mentioned, I'm not taking work home to grade. And this can be difficult. I know at the school I taught at, we had to teach extra classes. And because I was teaching certain classes that Other teachers weren't. I had to teach 8 classes out of a total of 8. So no planning, no break. So if you're in a situation like that, you have to realize, I better lean on these other strategies because I don't have enough of a boundary. But if you can help it, set those boundaries. These are the expectations I'll meet. These are the expectations that I will not meet, and you're going to have to deal.
Okay, so with that, let's go
Yeah.
back to the first year teacher
Mhm.
scenario here, who may not yet understand how they can do that without feeling a fear of
Mhm.
jeopardizing their job.
And that's a real fear. I absolutely understand that. When you're in that first year and you're saying, they're asking too much of me, and I don't know how to express that yet. We go back to the first one, mentorship, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need a mentor who's had those battles before, who've gone to the principal and say, you know what? I'm not doing this. You expect it? I'm not going to get it done. But here's how I'm prioritizing and what I can get done. Or you come with the solution. Here's what I could do or what you could adjust so that I do have time to get this done, right? You can do those things. And if you don't feel comfortable, it is okay to bring a mentor with you. Or if you're in a place that has a union, to bring a union rep with you to have those conversations. Now, it's scary, not going to lie. But you know what's more scary? Not having the conversation and then burning out and then quitting.
Yeah.
So it's okay to tell an administrator, the workload you're giving me right now is so much that I don't think I'll last in this profession. However, I'd really like to. Can we work on a solution where this thing doesn't take so much of my time? The other part of that is when you're a first year teacher, you're passionate, right? So you're jumping in and you actually want to do a lot of this stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember my first year, I was looking for a team to coach. What sports you got? I want to get involved. I want to get in there. And, all of a sudden I'm spending 12-hour days at the wrestling team going, what did I sign up for again?
Yeah.
So, part of it is, yes, you're excited, but that first couple of years, make it about the teaching and take on limited roles. So you want to do some extracurriculars? Pick one. You will be there a long time and you will make a great impact. You don't have to do everything in year one.
Yeah. I love that. I tried to conquer the world.
I think a lot of us come in that way. Yeah.
And it was quickly, I quickly came to reality that I can't save everybody. So, let me save my sanity first, and then let's work on everybody else. That became my philosophy. Okay. So are there any other tips though you want to bring to the table?
Yeah. I'll give you one more that'll be really effective. There's a handful, but SelfEfficacy is crucial to alleviating burnout. So when I talk about SelfEfficacy, when you're in the classroom and you're like, they're not paying attention. I'm not a good teacher. There are better teachers down the hall. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm kind of guessing on this. I don't feel super confident, right? When you feel that way, then everything that contributes to burnout ramps up by 1,000, right?
Right.
So if you're feeling pressure from administration and the workload is unbearable and you're running out of money and all those things are happening and you also feel like you're not good at your job, that is like a recipe for burnout 101.
Amen to that.
Yeah. So it's so important that you do things to fuel your own confidence. One of the things I love is affirmations. I don't care how much of a dork it makes me. I would stand up before my students came in, I would stand up in front of the class, look at the empty desk, and I would say some affirmations about how I'm a great teacher. I'm going to make an impact. I'm going to use the skills and training that I've been practicing. And you know what? I'm grateful for this opportunity. And by saying those things every day and just practicing believing in myself and building that confidence and that self-efficacy, when things started to get bad, at least I wasn't adding that building block to it of, I'm also not good enough for this job. I should definitely quit, right? I was able to leave on my own terms, not on the terms of I can't handle this job and I'm not good enough for it, which, a lot of teachers do end up leaving that way, and it's so unfortunate. Teaching is really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think we get it. A lot of people on the outside do not, which are, some of the reasons why we're in this current situation of, major burnout, because the outside folks just don't get it at all. Well, they got it for a little bit when everybody went home. And parents had to step in that role. They became friends real quick. It kind of changed the mindset. But
we were heroes for a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember them putting those signs out in front of the schools. I don't see those anymore.
Yeah, it disappeared somehow.
Which is a shame. But what I also do not see a lot of is leadership understanding this. Dr. Santoro talks a lot about this, burnout leading to demoralization.
Yes.
Because
love her work.
Yeah, leadership doesn't quite create an environment where burnout could either be dealt with or met or extinguished because they continue to not understand, just period. I'll just leave it at that. How do we create a message or a toolkit, for our leaders, who are running around right now trying to cover classes.
Yeah.
But still failing to realize that, we could probably help some of these things from the top down.
Sure. I think one of the first things to remember when we talk about school leaders is they have their own burnout epidemic going on. So, when you're talking about how do we help them help teachers, and they're saying, how do we help ourselves because we're on fire too, and the building's on fire, everything's on fire. So, I think I can give very solid advice and research-based advice, but understanding the human aspect of this is that none of us are capable right now of being at 100% to pull other people up to 100%. And understanding that, and we have to kind of just all move forward with empathy, because we really are stuck in a situation that is designated for us to fail. So how do we succeed in light of that? We have to understand it's not going to be beautiful. It's not going to be poetic. It's going to be a grind, and it's going to be tough. So, with that being said, because I want to give respect to school leaders, I know there are many who are really trying, and they feel like there's just no way out.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, we can talk about Dr. Santoro's work a little bit, because a lot of school leaders think that their decisions are purely about the school, and teachers, their decisions are moral and ethical, because we are the ones closest to the students who we have compassion for. We are in that job for the students as much as any other reason,
right?
If not more.
Bottom line.
Right? So when a principal makes a decision, or an assistant principal, or somebody else in a leadership role makes a decision, they might be looking at numbers or statistics or data, and they don't understand all the time that every single decision that impacts a classroom, we are looking at it from an ethical standpoint. Am I giving students what they deserve and what they need? Is this creating a barrier to giving students what they deserve and need? Is this harming the equity of my classroom? Right? And so as we're cycling through those questions, a school leader might be cycling through questions like, do I have enough staff to fit the needs of the school? Do I need to send all the students to the auditorium today because we can't cover? Right? So you see, the decision-making is on two different wavelengths. The key solution to that is, one, a school leader needs to understand why a teacher might be demoralized from these decisions that are coming down to them. And two, they need to be very clear and authentic and purposeful in showing the teachers why those decisions are made. right?
Yeah.
And if they're entirely clear and your whole staff understands why you're doing the things that you're doing, and they have the opportunity to provide feedback, now you might make some hard decisions, but they will still be on your side, and they will fight through their burnout and keep working towards a better school as best as they can, because they understand the purpose of the school and what they're doing in that role. If they don't understand their role, they're working against you now.
Yeah.
And that will make a school leader much more burnt out.
Yeah.
So I think it really comes down, in terms of quick fixes. Obviously, most of the fixes we need are political, funding related. I mean, there's bigger things that need to happen.
Correct.
But just on a school level, having better communication is like step number one to alleviating staff burnout and leadership burnout.
That's true in life.
Mm-hmm.
You and I are both married.
Yep.
And
I see where you're going. Yep.
But the most important factor is that communication. On both ends, the being able to express and the being able to hear and listen to what's really going on with your partner elsewhere. But more importantly to that, you also have to give yourself some grace.
Yes.
We're all gonna, at one point, my pastor says this all the time, you may be fine now, but keep living, because not everybody stays on a straight plane on a roller coaster. Eventually it's going to go down, it's going to go up. You're going to go through some loops as well. That piece is inevitable. But, and I believe the things that you're saying tonight helps people to understand that while that may be the case, that it's going to come up in some form of fashion, you can control how you respond to it.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, if you're okay with it, I got a short story. It'll make you laugh.
Go right ahead.
But I think it's right on point with that idea. So we had a meeting one year. It was at the beginning of the year, and they were introducing a new curriculum that they wanted us to use. And the curriculum included a mandatory question guide that we had to give them before and after the reading, mandatory passages, mandatory questions to read to the students and make them answer while reading the passage. I mean, just start to finish. And I had it. And I was very burnt out walking into that meeting. I mean, before we even talked about that stuff, this is the middle of my career. I want some autonomy. I want to be able to teach. And this was like the next in a series of 100 things that went wrong. And I flipped out in the middle of the meeting. And I started cussing out the person who was introducing it. And I told him, why don't you get a security guard to teach my class? Because I don't need to be here for this. It's just click a button and go. There's no thought. I went to town. And, I was in a tough school. They didn't make a lot of great decisions, I don't think. But there were some very good school leaders who were involved in that school. So even though a lot of the decision making, a lot of that comes from the district or even up higher, there were some very effective leaders there. So one took me out of the meeting and she pulled me to the side and she walked me back to my classroom and she was like, Kevin, I get it. I totally understand where you're coming from, but we need a better argument than just you yelling at the random person there. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right. So she was like, here's a list of district contacts who were involved in this decision. Here's why they made the decision. If you'd like to craft an argument, you can CC me to the email and I'll support you. And you can, have your say and you can express why you're frustrated with this. Now, don't go cussing them out, but do effectively make your point and see if you can affect a change that's going to help you in your classroom. And if you can't, I'm really sorry and I'll support you in every way I need to, but at least you've got some resources to get started and at least maybe find some better answers.
Love it.
That de-escalated everything I was feeling in that moment. And obviously I was feeling a lot in that moment. And that made me feel a lot more comfortable with that school leader. And I hated a lot of things going on in the school, but I could go to that person and I could feel like somebody was advocating for me.
Mm.
So even in the midst of burnout, having a leader who understands me and actively tries to help like that, it's world changing. So,
Wow.
you know, school leaders, they can play that role. You won't always give teachers the best news that they want to hear, unfortunately, or probably not often. But you can be authentic, you can give real answers, and you can guide them towards the higher decision makers who they really need to be talking to.
Wow. Kevin, thank you, for that. I mean, that's just actually a great way to go ahead and end our show tonight. Great story, and great story of actually hope as well.
Yeah.
And hopefully many of us who are experiencing, these feelings of burnout. I heard someone say, I can't remember exactly what it was. That burnout happens when you avoid being human too long. It's okay, you guys. We understand the frustration. We understand the tough times. But like Kevin mentioned, he mentioned a lot of good tips, mentoring, self-efficacy, setting positive boundaries, and if you go back to our SEL show from last week as well, some other good tips that'll help you out during the situation. Not that it's going to extinguish the fire immediately, but at least you'll have somebody to pull in with you while the house is burning down, that they can actually comfort you during the situation. We're praying for you guys. We hope that this year you can find a way to finish strong. I want to thank you once again, Kevin, for coming on and just being a light. I truly enjoy speaking with you, as well. I still have questions, so I think that may be a part 2.
All right.
And then maybe we can bring on Dr. Santoro as well, because I know she loves to have this conversation. So
I'd be honored. I hope she doesn't mind me. I am a total fan of her. I cited her in my dissertation like 8 times.
Is that right? Does she know this?
I don't know.
Okay.
I reached out to her once. I was like, I love your work. So
well, I've had her on the show a couple of times. I truly love her work, and I love what she is doing. So I'll reach out and we'll see if we can bring her on and make that happen here in this summer. I usually bring her on in the summer. Okay. As teachers are rethinking what it is that they're doing.
That's good timing.
I bring her on. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do thank you for joining us this evening. Like I said, if you're watching us on replay, trust me, we still appreciate it. If you're watching us on YouTube, Facebook, or if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. We're actually about to change that channel completely as we transition over to 414 Media, where we'll be housing several different shows, amplifying different voices and magnifying some stories that you haven't heard before. So stay tuned for that, but go ahead and subscribe early right now on that YouTube, and we'll have some more information out there soon. If you're on LinkedIn, we're going to be developing some learning series as well to help you with what we're talking about with making learning addictive. Even though this wasn't a topic about addictive learning, this was about learning about yourself and about what burnout is. And the more that you learn, the more that you're able to deal with these situations, understand those triggers, but also understand those holes for escape to get you out of those situations. It could be leaving, it could be staying, but it also could be finding a way for your leadership to support you, or if you are a leader, supporting your students and finding your own support as well. Don't forget to check in with your PLN on Twitter, on Facebook, or on LinkedIn as well, because we are truly better together in this. So once again, we love you. Thank you for joining Making Learning Addictive, and we'll see you next time. Actually, next week, we'll have our music show talking about hip hop in the classroom and why it is needed today. See y'all next time.
Can't wait for that one.